Well, it felt like we were just getting started, but the finale of Doctor Who Season 1 is upon us. The Legend of Ruby Sunday is here, and I'd like to talk about it. I'd like to talk about it, but I'm not really sure how, because it kind of feels like half an episode, and I'd like to dive into why. I'm not the first person to point this out, but this episode is pretty much entirely set up, and I've seen some people go, well yeah, of course, this is always how part ones are, and I'm not sure that that's true. I don't think... I don't necessarily mean this in a bad way, but I think part ones, especially if you look at part ones of finales, it's kind of like, you know, you get a slow learning of information, you know, a mystery kind of unfolds on screen and you're kind of getting mini payoffs throughout the episode, and then for the big, you know, finale cliffhanger, you've got kind of an escalation of that stuff that we've already learned, or a subversion of that stuff we've already learned, and that's the thing. And it's the episode, you know, look at World Enough in Time, look at Army of Ghosts, that's what sprung to mind a lot when I was watching this episode. There's a lot within that episode that is kind of, it belongs to that half of the story. Whereas this week's episode, it's not a case of our characters gradually learning things, you know, and then the full truth being revealed at the end. It's our characters learning nothing, and everything we do learn is learned in that final reveal, you know. The episode's runtime is spent ramping up the mystery, you know, the questions just keep piling on each other. There's no mini answers, there's no, okay, now we understand this, how do we just know nothing. It's the whole thing. And I think that is what sets it apart. I think sets it apart is a nice way to put it, because it's not, I don't think the episode has to do what the old finale part ones did, but I think pretending that this is just another, you know, part one in the same way that those part ones were, I think that does a disservice to what those episodes were doing in themselves, whereas I think this week is very much dependent on next week. There is some stuff to the kind of moment-to-moment experience of this episode, you know, some stuff that makes it engaging, some stuff that makes it interesting, some stuff that's worth talking about, I suppose. I think starting with, like, the ensemble of units, you know, I think, you know, I quite like this as an idea, you know, I quite like there being a team of characters that can help solve a problem, and I think it makes a good change of pace and a change of dynamic from when it's just the Doctor and Ruby, you know, and I think, I don't know, I don't want that to be the main setup, I don't want it to be what the show is, but when it is kind of what we do for an episode, that's fun, you know, we've got people figuring things out as a group, little moments are like, fun things of like the Doctor, like having this big dramatic moment where he's like, guys, don't you see? Look at the anagram, it spells TARDIS, and they're like, yeah, we all figured this out, and it's, I think that's a kind of thing that kind of group dynamic affords you, and you can have moments like that you couldn't necessarily have with just like Doctor Companion TARDIS. So there's that. I guess talking about the characters themselves, Kate, I'm continuing to really enjoy in this era, which is so funny because I have just, you know, it's been about 10 years and I have not cared for this character at all until now. And there have been, you know, some people on Twitter and things that are saying, you know, well, Russell's mishandling Kate, you know, she's meant to be XYZ. I guess maybe if you've been a fan of how Kate was and now she's clearly different enough that I now like her, maybe, you know, she's lost what made you like her, you know, originally. But for me, I'm just like, oh wow, this is a character that actually feels like she's adding something here, and no, she's not just the blank stoic face of UNIT. I mean, she's often, you know, the complaint is that she's not much more beyond just daughter of the Brigadier, but in this episode she has that moment where she talks about like the Brig telling stories to her. She doesn't say, the Brig used to tell me stories. She talks about her father. And there's this kind of humanity to it, this kind of... she's reflecting on him as a man and as a father in a way that feels way more authentic to so much of the just, yes, my father thought this about you. Yes, my father said this. I'm my father's daughter and he's my dad. It felt like an actual story that someone might tell about, you know, their dad growing up, and I think that, and that kind of bonding with the Doctor over it, or just at least reflecting on it of just, we both knew this same man, I thought that worked in a way that it rarely does. And we've got Mel, who is this lovely kind of recurring presence now. I like that she's just kind of there, you know, it's not a case of like, oh my god, it's Mel, classic companion Mel, you know, light shining on her, oh my god, this is an amazing, you know, moment that we're celebrating the show's history. It's just, oh no, look, there's Mel again, isn't she great? And I think Bonnie Langford and Russell T Davies, they've taken this character that I think had very little going for her, really. I don't think it's too much of a hot take to say that. And they've kind of just turned her into this wonderful presence, and I love spending time with her as a character now, and I think the way she's this warm presence in the Doctor's life, and almost, because she's now, that much older than Ncuti, that much older than the Doctor, there's this kind of this warmth. It's not maternal, but it's kind of caring and lovely in a way that the Doctor sometimes needs. And I think that there's a moment in this episode where the Doctor has a little outburst, and Mel kind of reassures. It's like part comfort, part encouraging, part come on, get on with it. This is what you do, Doctor. And I think that was really effective. And yeah, I'm really happy to have Mel around, especially when she's this great. We of course have the long-awaited return of the Vlinks. I think the Vlinks conceptually is just really funny. This kind of unexplained alien thing that's just in the wall, and that fans get really angry about, like, who even is the Vlinks? Why are we wasting time on the Vlinks? I think it just makes me laugh. I don't know if I'm laughing at the show, with the show. I don't quite know what we're doing with the Vlinks, but I'm enjoying it. We also have Morris, this child genius character, as the new scientific advisor. I wonder what happened to Shirley. He's kind of a fun-ish presence throughout, doesn't have too much to sink his teeth into. I don't know. We also have Rose, I guess if we're talking about UNIT, hiring actual children, Rose and Morris. It kind of raises a couple of eyebrows there. Rose, I don't know, it's nice to kind of see the love between her and the Doctor and let that come through. And I think it very much, from my perspective, puts any question of like, the 15th Doctor comes after the bi-generated 14th Doctor. They're not fully separate entities. That's kind of what I was thinking, was that like, this is a man who once was the 14th bi-generated Doctor and spent the time with the Noble family and has now moved on. And I think that works for me, and I like, the weirdness of it is kind of addressed there, that he's like, oh, how's your uncle? How's me from the past or adjacent, who knows? Other than that, Rose just as a presence here and as a role within the story, really weird, really bizarre to bring her in just to do nothing, very little. As a presence, she's just kind of flat. She's just kind of, I don't know, there's nothing here that makes me go, oh yeah, that's why you bring Rose in for this. And I think it comes at the expense of other characters, give more of that stuff to Morris, develop that character, or there's another third character of the kind of underdeveloped ensemble there. Harriet turns out to be Harriet Arbinger. It's a twist, and I don't think her role in the episode anywhere near justifies the importance of that twist reveal. It's like, oh no, not Harriet, not the person who had a few lines here and there within the UNIT ensemble. I think you give Harriet Morris's job, right? In the time window, you have her give all that exposition, and then there's that extra layer there. You give Harriet Rose's job going to get the tape. It just, you turn Harriet into more of a presence, then the twist turns into something, and maybe we would start to think a little more like, who's this person? Why is she suddenly so important? But that happened. That's what Doctor Who is, right? You meet someone every week and they become really important for the sake of that story, and then that changes. And I think, yeah, kind of odd to when one of the three characters here is that important, giving her the least amount of stuff to do, but also the two that are left, they don't have enough to do either. Yeah, I think fundamentally this season has been too short to sustain this number of recurring supporting characters, and I don't think there's a better example of that than Carla. I spent the whole episode going, oh, what's the deal with Ruby's mum? And you'd think that was the intention, but actually I was wondering about Carla. I just think, I don't know, we've only properly seen her twice, I guess. We've had tiny glimpses of her in like Space Babies and Rogue, but we've properly got her in The Church on Ruby Road, and we properly got her in 73 Yards briefly. And in both of those episodes, something happens that turns her mean and sad. And it's just like, I don't know, she's in this episode, the Doctor's like, oh, bring Carla up, it's Carla, don't we all love Carla? And it's like, I don't have anything against Carla, but I don't know, we're on that level where it's like, of course Carla can come along, yeah, right guys? You just think about how well we knew Jackie Tyler by the end of Series 1, one. I mean, Parting of the Ways has that fantastic, gorgeous Father's Day kind of moment where Jackie, has that discussion with Rose, and that leads to her getting the big yellow truck. And I think that wouldn't work if we didn't know Jackie as well as we knew Jackie, and she wasn't so well defined across that series. And I just think Carla is not at that level at all. She's not even close, and that's not because she's been poorly written or because she's been poorly performed. It's just that she's been she's not been there enough, because there's not been enough opportunities for her to be there, because there's not been enough episodes this season. She's just kind of there once she's involved. She's there for the time window stuff. And I was thinking, I know that she's about to become important to this in some way. She's about to, her presence here is about to be justified, but in the time until then, it feels kind of awkward. And then throughout the episode and throughout that sequence, that her presence wasn't justified, and it just stayed awkward for the whole thing. And obviously this is still only half of the story, but I don't, if she does end up getting brought in a way that really does feel vital next week, then I think she could have been brought in later and not just be one of the very many characters stood around the time window. And because I think that's one of the things of the time window, is that there's just so many of them there, and you could strip that back a bit, because the time window, that whole sequence was one of the highlights for me. I think it's such a cool idea. It's a really effective visual, really effectively executed. I think it's home to the most interesting sequence that this episode has going for it. It's the kind of one thing you can point to in this story and go, that sequence and that idea belongs to The Legend of Ruby Sunday. Everything else kind of feels like we're just getting a preview of next week. But yeah, I really liked it. I loved the setup of it. I really enjoyed the Doctor going, if we had a time window. Kate, do you have a time window? And Kate's like, you've forbidden us from ever meddling with time. And he's like, do you? And she's like, yeah, just a couple of 10 levels down. I think that's just a fun kind of moment of the tension. It's light-hearted tension, but the tension between the Doctor and Unit of he's very much put these clear rules in place, but he kind of knows that they've probably broken them, and they've broken them, and when it matters, they're able to go, yeah, okay, we did, here you are. I do think it's funny that they set out these rules of this night, this Ruby Road night is so much in flux. It's so timey-wimey fucky that we can't risk going back in the TARDIS. We can't, this is a memory that keeps changing. There's, it's a memory that keeps bringing itself into the present day with the snow. It's something that we really can't meddle with unless we kind of put it on this weird time technology machine that does feel like the kind of thing that might meddle with it. I know they're not actually visiting it, but this isn't a memory that has needed actual visiting to be powerful so far. So it is funny that they do it, but I don't mind that they do it, because it's as I said, it's good and cool and interesting, and the fact it's all kind of VHS tape mode. When they said they had the tape, I was kind of worried that, and Unit were like, we've got all this technology, we can enhance this. I thought it would just be like, the zoom and enhance kind of cliche of just, oh look, let's enhance these pixels. Oh no, they're time blurry, something weird like that. And we kind of get that on a big scale, but it's as part of something that actually is really cool. And I love the reveal of the window, and it's this set, it's this technology that looks really high tech and really fancy, and it's this set that, from a out of universe perspective, you're going, this looks a very expensive, swanky set that they've built for this. And the Doctor just laughs at it. He thinks it's rough. He's like, oh my god, you guys have this is it's the kind of the time travel snobbery that he shows towards the vortex manipulator and things like that. And I think that's a great character bit from the Doctor, of not just again being this warm, always nice character. He is just like, you guys, you've got a lot of catching up to do. And then once the sequence really gets going, it's just this wonderful slow building tension, this kind of really atmospheric, the VHS element of it, the fact that things look slightly off, the fact Ruby's mother, or whoever's under that cloak, looks different to everything else in the thing, and she seems to have just slightly different rules to everything else in the footage. That's really cool. You get these moments of kind of, emotion where Ruby's talking to her mum, Carla's talking, and it's like, this is nice, but is there something wrong? And there is this still, the sense of dread never goes away, and it's like, I don't quite know. It's like in Wild Blue Yonder, where it's like, are you Donna? I want to give you a hug, but I don't know that you are Donna. It's that same sense of like, what are we actually experiencing here? And I think it's really cool having this creature that appears either in the room or in the footage, and they're not quite sure, they're going, when is that thing? I think that's such an interesting thing, that when you're in this big immersive environment and suddenly something strange shows up on the footage, it's like, are you in the room with us? Are you able to? And then it, does start interacting, but you're still not quite sure when or where this thing is. I think that's really effective. Maybe potentially the sequence goes on a little too long, but at the same time, I think it is the best thing that the episode's doing, so I'm glad that we're spending the most time on it, because, there was just so much kind of, I think, really palpable dread there that I really responded to, and I think, if you can point to one thing within this episode that is, memorable and good and interesting, it's that, and it probably isn't the other side of this story, the Susan Triad, Susan twist exploration. I think the Triad subplot is a tricky one because as far as it's like the other half of this unfolding mystery, it's kind of inherently less interesting because it's not really unfolding at all. It is just a very kind of static existing thing that isn't going anywhere until right at the end, and then that twist is done. And I think the way it kind of plays out throughout the episode, it's kind of like, we don't gain any ground on it until it is revealed, and it's revealed as part of a bigger reveal that I think maybe takes a lot of the focus away. So I think that maybe could have been handled better, or we've not seen properly how it's going to be handled yet. I hope there is more to Susan Twist in the final episode than just being this raspy skull. I think the skull looks really cool, by the way, but I think the raspy kind of skull, I'm an agent of Sutekh and I'm just a minion now. I think it would be great to get into the character of Susan Triad, Susan Tech, Susan Twist, get a little more into that and a little more into the explanation of that. I think, because I've really liked the mystery of her popping up in all these places, I think what this episode really needed was a kind of inciting incident that drives the episode forward, kind of propels them to take action. Like they meet Susan Twist one more time. Like you're thrown into a random adventure with the Doctor and Ruby, and they're like, no, you know what? Screw all this. We just need to get to the heart of what is going on with Susan Twist here. Like, why is this woman everywhere? Like maybe they try and confront her or they lose track of her or something. I think that's what this episode needs, rather than just them going, oh, you know what, let's start the finale, let's just pop in, see unit. We don't see any of that discussion. They're just there and they're like, hi guys, we've got something we'd like you to solve. No biggie, no major urgency there. Just something we've decided we should probably get to. I think, that kind of would have, I think, given the Susan Triad side of the story a little more momentum as we carry through. But there were things, I guess, I don't know, it's hard to chew on much. It's hard to point to much within this because it's not doing much until it does, it plays its hand. It can't play its hand too early because it really so far only has the Sutekh reveal, and they've got to wait till the other side of the story gets to that part of things. I like that Mel goes undercover and discovers that she's nice. I think that's fun, that it's like, we've got Mel investigating that. To be honest, what she's learned is that she's just kind of a nice, good lady, and I think that's the interesting stuff that to me I'd like to see revisited, rather than just like, an unexplained kind of, this was just a vessel of one of, because we've got Harriet as the harbinger. I'd like to see Susan be more than that. I'm just trying to think of anything to point to. I know she does the kind of Theresa May dance walk across the stage when she's presenting, and I think that's odd. I think, remember in Revolution of the Daleks where there was this kind of very stern female prime minister, and this was 2021, and we were all like, God, Theresa May was ages ago, Chibnall. Get with the program. And now Russell is, riffing on Theresa May 17 prime ministers later, I think, and it doesn't really make sense because like Susan Triad is meant to be really nice, and it's like, oh, but in this moment she's like that dreadful politician. It's like, I don't know, that feels a bit mean. Unless it's Susan Triad doing a riff on Theresa May, in which case she also needs to get with the programme. Someone needs to update their political commentary references there. I'm not sure who. Do you dream about being an ambulance? Might be my favourite line of the episode. It might be my favourite line of the series. It is just, I don't know, there's something just so brilliantly hilarious about it, and it's just that said with so much conviction from the Doctor, just the most ridiculous statement of all time. I did that. That is, I think, just a classic Doctor Who line now. Just, do you dream of being an ambulance? I think, yeah, if anything great came from the Susan Triad side of this episode, it was that line. But yeah, I think next week we'll have to see quite what happens when Sutekh properly comes into the picture. And let's talk about Sutekh. As I've said, the episode saves a lot of its substance, a lot of its juice for that final reveal, because that's kind of the one thing it's leading to, is this big kind of all your questions answered in one big reveal, rather than a kind of slow burn kind of thing. And I have to say that as a reveal, I think it was really effectively done. I think, you've got the fact it's happening on two different fronts. You've got the TARDIS, something's going wrong with the TARDIS. You've got kind of Susan Triad up on stage starting to say weird things, and it's all starting to come together. The music is rising and building, and you've got the chanting of Sutekh. You've got the wonderful, what's it called? Anagram. It's an anagram bait and switch, because it's not an anagram. Sutekh ends up not being one, but it's like, we thought it was all about TARDIS, S-Triad, but actually it's S-Triad technology, technology, Sutekh. I think that's really fun. It's a shame that people worked it out, and that we kind of, I don't know, I think that's the downside of being so ingrained in the fandom and so involved and trying to get people to watch my videos, is that I then have to see all the people who are going, oh, S-Triad Technologies, Susan Triad, Sutekh. Yes, Sutekh's coming back. Some of those people, very clever, reading all the clues that are available, going, oh, they said in Doctor Who magazine that someone confused the villain for Poirot, and look, if it's Sutekh and David Suchet, those names are very similar. That's we've figured it out. Those are the clues. Some people, I think, have been very clever. Some people, I think, read leaks months ago and then are passing off their knowledge of spoilers as intelligent deductions. They're going, using nothing but my cunning, my intellect, and a fully leaked breakdown of all the events of this season's plot, I have figured out what's going to happen. Aren't I clever? And I think, what do you gain from that? Like a bit of Twitter clout, a few people going, wow, you're seeing the future. I don't know. Do you feel good about that? Does that give you joy? This feels very... I'm not talking about anyone in particular. I think it's such a tiresome thing of I don't know, leak culture and the need to know things. That's one thing, but then the need to kind of pass off that knowledge as, speculation, and joining in with this kind of discussion with more information than you should have, and going, well, I think this is going to happen, but based on things that I shouldn't know. And it's like, well, fuck off. We're having fun here. We're talking about the things that are kind of have been made available to us. And I don't know, this is such a tangent here. Let's talk about Sutekh as far as is it alienating for fans, for non-fans of classic Who? And I think that is, as Doctor Who fans, we're always so conscious and so concerned about casual viewers and people being turned off from it and going, oh, but hang on, that will alienate people. I'm guilty of that as well. I did that video last year, kind of, we need a new jumping on point for the show, and I kind of talk about all the ways in which previous jumping on points eventually let new viewers down by relying on things from the past. I think I stand by some of that, but I also think everything in the show, everything in the revival was new to the revival at some point. Daleks, Cybermen, Davros, Dalek Emperor, the Master. It's all these things that, at one point was just a thing that they were bringing back from this old classic series. And I think we're hyper vigilant now to be like, oh no, that's going to put people off. They're not going to know what's going on. And I think I was kind of starting to talk myself out of this and go, well, actually, Dalek Emperor in the finale of Series 1, that builds nicely on Dalek and the Time War, and the kind of Cybermen, they got their own origin in the revival, and then they build on that in the finale, and the Master, we don't know the character if we've just watched the new series, but it is kind of a direct comment on the Last of the Time Lords thing that has been running through the last three series. So I think those things, they have a foundation in the show that we're watching, and Sutekh, I guess, at a glance can feel a little bit more like he's just come out of nowhere and it's just, this is a glup shito. But I think it does tie into this whole kind of god thing that they're doing, and they're talking about, gods of this, gods of that, the maestro, the toy maker, talking about the trickster. I think, I don't know, bringing that in and going, well, this is the main one, this is the god of those gods, and there's this pantheon, and this is, I feel like it's kind of overestimating how much knowledge you need to wrap your head around big Egyptian scary god character, and it's kind of, I don't know, underestimating the ability of a casual viewer to go, yeah, I know what's going on because the Doctor just said who this character was, and the character kind of explained themselves that they are this big scary figure. So I think, maybe even more so than like the Master in Utopia, you've kind of got the information that you need here to understand that. And then for the sake of classic Who fans, it's great to see Sutekh again, and I think the design is and it's a redesign. I think it's a good one. The voice is still fantastic. It's Gabriel Wolf, who I think is 91 years old. I think that's I don't know. We'll have to see how Sutekh is used and kind of how just how that's pulled off next week. But I'm excited, and I've spoken to some people, a fair few people actually, who haven't seen the classic series at all. They don't know Sutekh at all, and they thought the reveal really hit hard, and they're excited, and that they don't feel excluded in any way. They can wrap their head around kind of scary Egyptian-y kind of god, because it's not the most complicated thing that you can bring back. And it ties into this era's own, new arc of the one who waits. And I think, having that TARDIS indigestion throughout the season. And I think in this episode, twisting that into something more sinister and growling. And I thought that was good. I guess other kind of miscellaneous points to make. I quite liked the Elon Musk joke in Unit. I thought that was nicely done. It was almost quite a subtle thing. I know it went over the heads of a lot of people, the kind of evil geniuses with alien tech. We've had to take down quite a few. We've missed the obvious, though. Like, well, we'll get him. I've seen some people thinking that was referring to the Doctor. It doesn't make sense if it does, really. In that context, it is definitely a Musk joke. I thought Mrs. Flood's scene was pretty cool, even though, her and Cherry Sunday, they both could have done with being a little bit more fleshed out throughout the series. I thought just, even before Mrs. Flood breaks the fourth wall, just a nice old lady suddenly becoming not nice, I think that's just a cool thing to happen. But then the fourth wall break as well, I think that is good. There is a little question of like, is there more being teased here with Mrs. Flood? Because I think the Doctor talks about Time Lords and their ability to hide themselves away, and Mrs. Flood's like, well, I'm always hiding myself away, and it's like, oh, is she a Time Lord? Is there something going on there? I don't think she is Susan. I think she's probably got her own stuff going on, probably next season. But yeah, no, I don't think she's going to be the payoff of all this Susan Foreman stuff. But that being said, I do think there will be payoff of all this Susan Foreman stuff. I think they do make a bit of a logical leap very early on in this episode to kind of go from, oh, wow, that's your granddaughter's name, to, yes, we are assuming that this is your granddaughter, Susan Foreman. They don't necessarily assume that, but I think they get further along in their suspicions than they probably should. But maybe that's just a very meta thing, and it is playing with our, we've had a really hyper Susan sense all the way through the revival. Every time there's a woman, anytime there's any mystery, it's like, Susan? Is that Susan? Is that... So, and I guess, it was the TARDIS, it was the TARDIS technologies, all this, and I think maybe that was a reasonable thing for them to go, well, we shouldn't ignore this coincidence, but yeah, maybe one extra line of like, okay, let's act as though it is this, and then we'll be prepared for the fact it's not. But as I said in my Devil's Cord video, I think as soon as Susan was actually discussed in a very kind of concrete way in that episode, I was like, okay, I think Susan might be coming back, and this is just more confirmed. I don't think you do a misdirect like that where you go, is it Susan? Is it Susan? No, it's not Susan, without then giving us actual Susan. I would be really surprised if we didn't see her soon, and I'm very excited for that. I think... I've just remembered they do something very odd, don't they? They have that one conversation where the Doctor implies that he doesn't have children, that Susan is his granddaughter, but he hasn't had kids yet, and it's all timey-wimey. And I think that's kind of fucked. I think that's dreadful, and I'd rather they not pursue that. I think I don't know, it goes against, not like law, not canon, that's not what I care about, because I think Susan has always been this relic of a version of the Doctor's characterization and the Doctor's backstory that is kind of incompatible with what we kind of go on to learn from him, you know, this old man with his granddaughter, and then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, he's from this civilization called the Time Lords, he stole a box and ran away, and it's like, yeah, but he did this as a, you know, old man with a granddaughter and a family, I think. But that, to me, has always made Susan such a compelling thing. She's this kind of thing that you would never introduce now. But the fact that she was there right at the start makes her so important and so core to the Doctor's character. And I think it has created the implication of the family that the Doctor must have once had creates such this, you know, this underlying sadness. You know, this tragedy to the character that he must have at a time had kids. He must have had all that, and the fact he doesn't currently speaks to this unspoken loss. You know, this loss running through even like pre-Time War. This kind of character that once was a dad, was once, you know, a very you know, not human, but, you know, a very relatable existence of raising children, and now he is this loner who doesn't have children. I think, you know, this is something that Fearher talks about when, you know, the Doctor's talking about kids. It's something that you really get into in the Doctor's daughter. It's something, you know, Amy in series 5 clocks that the Doctor must have at some point been a father. There's all these moments where it's like, oh man, this fun, happy-go-lucky guy was once just, you know, a parent. And I think to go, no, actually, he wasn't. He did raise a granddaughter, but that was through some timey-wimey contrivance that, you know, allowed the first Doctor to be, you know, presented with this granddaughter that he had to raise. And not good at all. Bad, actually. Thumbs down from J-Boi for that one. Yeah, fix that, Russell. Fix your law. You know, maybe the Doctor was just lying to Kate. He was just fucking with her a bit, like, well, I don't know. Was it Kate? Was it Mel? I don't know. I think it was, yeah, it was Kate. He was just like, oh, yeah, no, I don't have kids. Yeah, I do have a granddaughter. Yeah. It's funny that. Maybe he's sad. Maybe that's it. It's playing with that tragedy. God, I hope so. It probably isn't. Russell's probably just being a big moron here. Sad. I don't want to end there because that's a very negative thing and it's not my main takeaway from the episode, but at the same time, I don't have much of a main takeaway from this episode, really. I'm baffled by, you know, the fact that there are people saying, you know, this was absolutely dreadful, I hated every minute, this is so embarrassing, or they've dropped the ball, this was really rough, and I'm almost equally potentially more baffled by the people saying that this was incredible, this was an absolute banger, you know, this finally, you know, some people finally, this is a good episode, you know, after all this time we finally got a good one. It's just like, what? Because to me it's just, you know, it's half an episode. It is entirely dependent on what happens next week, in a way that, you know, I think The Doctor Falls could have been terrible and World Enough in Time still would have been incredible, but if this goes, you know, badly next week, then I think it retroactively turns this into a kind of waste of our time, really. And I think that's a precarious position for a finale to be in. But, you know, we'll see. I have faith that it won't be a total disaster. But if it's great next week, I think we'll look at this as like, I don't think it turns this episode into a great episode. You know, a great part 2 doesn't turn this pretty good part 1 into a great part 1, but we can go, all right, I can see how that was necessary. But yeah, it is entirely dependent on next week, so I'm excited to see where we go from that. As I've said, there is stuff within this episode that keeps it engaging and interesting, and, you know, as far as episodes that are entirely build-up go, this could be much worse at doing that build-up. I think it is an effectively, you know, rising tension episode. I think it is an effective reveal at the end, that final payoff of the entire episode of uncertainty, and there's still so much that we need to learn. So I think, yeah, a pretty good episode. But I'd love to know what you think about it. You know, I'd love to have those conversations. Don't be put off by the fact I'm baffled at the fact that people might love or hate this episode, because I'd really love to hear your justifications and discuss that, and maybe you'll give me something to think about that I wasn't, you know, capable of thinking about until then. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I can't believe we're nearly at the end of these weekly Doctor Who videos. I'm really going to miss them. Subscribe to the channel to see next week's. Watch my previous weeks. I'm going to keep doing this for every Doctor Who episode that comes out in this era. So yeah, I have so much fun with these. Yeah, subscribe to the channel, as I said. Like this video, share it. If you're in the south of England, come along to Hayling Island in the last week of June for Hayling Musical Society's production of Jekyll and Hyde. You might see a familiar face in one of the minor roles, I'll just tell you that. Yeah, I'll see you next week. Love you lots.